Okay, fantastic. So good. I'm not going to move, so I'm okay with this. Okay, yeah. Let me ask you to pass this around. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. It was being a very interesting event. Actually, I'm learning a lot about big data. I have no idea about big data at all. I don't even know what it was. Not that I know now, obviously, but still, I can see that it's used for a lot of things. And actually, I would like to welcome you to this roundtable. And it's going to be, I'm hoping to be quite dynamic. I don't have a structured, let's say, like a way to follow up with this table. I have a couple of questions that I actually shared with you guys by mail before, and they have been already touched during the talks, which is actually have been quite good. First, I'm going to introduce the panel, although I think that you have seen all of them, but I'm going to introduce them. We have Mr. Carlos Domene from the CDTI. We have the Fatemeh Vafaee, fantastic. And we have Alexandra at Sherstyuk. We have Alfonso García-Valdés. We have Salvador-Carulla. And we have with us in Zoom, Katrina from ANU. Wave. Good, fantastic. So the idea was to actually, and the reason why this panel was chosen is because we're talking about big data. We have a very hectic day and eclectic in the thematic of between industry and research and university research, government research and so on. But I would like to actually try to open the conversation to try to explore the differences, right? Because as actually was at the very end with a fantastic talk by Alexandra, talking about what is the actual difference between using data due to privacy when you're working in industry, when you're working in a research environment. So the first question I have is about what is understood by the data privacy, and I mean, what is actually the difference when you're working in a research institution like a university, and what is the difference when you're trying to use that data for profit? And no offense taken here, but that's actually the reality, and that's what industry does, right? So is that difference? Any of you have experience in both areas? I could start opening the conversation that you can actually highlight a few things, and we can carry on from there. Who is?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I would sort of course, go from the research perspective and what we sort of do and try to sort of preserve those privacy and also have the reuse of data, which is quite important for research to be carried out. One of the main things in the domain of biomedicine and genomics or omics data is that we are dealing with data that we have a huge number of variables. So at the same time, we need a huge number of samples. We need a lot of participants to be able to make the outcome of interpretation solid and robust. So we always, as a researcher, would like to encourage people to basically have their information accessible for research. But at the same time, there are a lot of concerns come in terms of privacy. For health data, so the genomic data has been covered by Alexandra as well, but I would like just to highlight that it has been basically one of the major jumps in increasing privacy in the context of genomics was by a paper which has been published in 2013 in Science. And the interesting things that they have done, they could de-identify, they could re-identify basically the de-identified male in the US based on using some sort of part of their Y chromosome as well as some public data in terms of genealogy. And that was like a shock that the data has been de-identified, but it can be re-identified, and the surname has been retrieved out. And then once that has been done, they have went and follow up their predictions, and they could basically validate that this is really re-identified. So after that, a lot of things has been happening, both in terms of like once we want to work with data generation in the research space, there is lots of ethical committees that to some extent is quite hard, because now, for instance, we are waiting for 2 years to just get like ethic approved, but this is needed. There are a lot of like common acts globally, as well as not just to get consent from patients or from the participants as well, that what are the data that has been released, etc. These are all needed. And on top of that, what has happened eventually has restricted some data. So there are some genomic data, for instance, for one of the major resources that we use is by the NIH, that is the GPEX data set, they call it. They have both genomics data and transcriptomic data, and they just make that part of the data that is potential to be re-identified just private. And for accessing that, we need to go through a very time-consuming path for everything to be approved for me as a scientist for a very small period of time to have access to that data. But previously, there was all like publicly accessible. They are, of course, in need, and at the same time, it's like slow down. But this is the challenge that we are dealing with.
Okay. No, that's yes, please do. So I guess that the question is, it would be any difference when you're trying to access data that could be somehow privacy issues with it. Is let's say that researchers have a easier job than industry to get to that, or is any feeling on that? Is industry probably more difficult because you're supposed to use it for profit and not from an open research? I don't know. You have anything to say on that?
Add to that. Thank you. Thank you. So one thing to mention is, first of all, as we're living through the information age at the moment, we used to consider privacy. The definition has changed as we're living through the information age. We used to look at privacy as sort of leave me alone kind of thing. Don't touch my data. Just don't, leave me alone. Now, the privacy definition is more like, let me control the access. So that led to a huge number of different consents. You have informed consent, tiered consent, different types of consents that you would be signing depending on whether it's research or healthcare facility or direct-to-consumer company. And on top of it, and that is to comply with, say, Privacy Act 1988 that Australia has, or HIPAA that the US has. They're all supposedly covering the healthcare industry using that data. However, when you start introducing direct-to-consumer companies, so the industry steps in from that side, it's very different. There are many gaps. So direct-to-consumer companies is like 23andMe, Ancestry.com. Consenting is different in that you're actually giving your data straight to the industry. You no longer have that protection that the Privacy Act 1988 provides. The consent is different, right? So there is this push and pull situation, like you're saying, researchers are now having to deal with the legalities of getting that data. It's not publicly available. Everyone has to have large cohorts of patients to get some meaningful results, right? That's costly. Lots of research groups have to collaborate, this and that. And at the same time, you know, say direct-to-consumer companies have an easier access, and a larger, millions of people have donated their DNA to just one genealogy. I'm not going to say names anymore. Just one of these have millions of people donating their DNA, right? That's how they found that serial killer, for example. And it's just an imbalance, I feel like, in privacy acts. And there are frameworks that are currently being established, like the fair privacy something, 5-year timeline to establish a common, uniform, global privacy framework, security framework, specifically for genomic data. So these initiatives are ongoing, but they also highlight the importance of speeding that process up and making it so that we don't have to push and pull to make progress.
So it seems to me that the big data science is actually advancing quicker, that we can assimilate what the privacy actually is in this area, right? So please.
Yeah, well, we are talking about the same. Means that things are not running because the issues still are the same. You know? Yeah. 1 year ago, we were talking about what happened with the active rights, what happened with the shared data. I guess I try to be honest and try to don't simplify the things just in a click. But I get that this world needs a cool reset every certain time. You know, formerly was worse, so probably now we need to face pandemic for really starting to consider the thing different. But I guess that we are not selling ours in our swing line, at least the industry. We are not IP sellers. We don't want to sell IP rights. We want to deliver vessels with the technology available in the market for everybody. And I need to be, as an industry partner, to be so productive, so good in my processes and product to really run the contracts. But why we are creating IP rights, it doesn't make sense that the industry need to protect the IP rights. The IP rights should be or in the countries or in the universities or in those that are really preparing for that. In the forecast budget for the next 5 years, I need to allocate that budget for do research and development. But research and development need to put it on overheads, on my rates, or just because it's an investment, or try to cover with management reserve or whatever. But we are dealing with an issue. And that, when we create the capabilities, we don't share with nobody, you know? I don't want to share with nobody. And then why I need to protect any IP right? The IP right not be in my side, need to be above the line. In defense environment, probably could be with similar sensitivity that in medical. So you need to protect the data because certain reasons. The sensitivity of data in the defense environment is because, you know, every one country wants to maintain their own security protected. Cybersecurity as well. But we probably can destroy, I'm trying to don't simplify a lot, but anyway, we can destroy the cybersecurity issues if the info is fully available. It's easy to find. Internet changed many of those walls and in protection areas that formerly our former designer has had. Means all the steps that we run in the path to really swing all of us our own swing line and don't cross the lines could be much better to really look for a potential issue fixes in the next 10 years. If we are, believe me, all the good research and development that Navantia did in the last 20 years, I joined the company 28 years ago, and believe me, those that I'm really proud was all the relationship that we have had with universities all around the seashore of Spain. Young people making with skilled guys, providing the needed that the owners request to designers. And then we need someone to do this thing with this outcome and with this requirement and with this budget and with this time. We need to manage program, not to manage investigation projects, you know, and because we have not this capability. And if we need to create, we are doing something against others. And I get that the right way to proceed is putting in line everybody swimming their own swim lines. And probably we need a reset, it could reset soon. But anyway, I get that for now, it's really complicated to really share data. But we are trying to do all the rest in that way because at least if the sensitive data, the real data that we need to run our path, probably is not really needed right now. We can manage with demos, you know. We don't need the real data that could be underprotected of the defense environment and so. But why not to starting to consider, no, we want to deal with demos and it don't matter. I just only try to compare with the patterns I mentioned before. I just only want to create replicas of something and try to avoid the correlation issue that you have when you normally need to really moving this to other scenarios, you know? Exactly the same with the medicine. You're starting with animals And when the animals are running, you need to correlate these values to human, assuming risks and starting with a process. The only way to shortcut this long range is to really prepare some digital things and really have digital twin for human and check. You know? And that is exactly the same with a platform system. But we don't want to sell this path. I prefer to do someone with more capabilities, with more information, with more skills, do this path run this path for us. And we will pay because we have the money for do this. We have money. We have not the skills. If we need to create the skills, we are not running the right way.
That's a very good point. So privacy, you want to talk about the privacy because that link also with the next question that you wanted to raise, I guess. The expert.
Just in privacy, and what Alexandra said is what we are seeing is a complete revolution of the concept of research knowledge, scientific knowledge, and all the things related to it. And one of these is privacy, where what we are seeing is that while at the university and academia, you may have 2 years ethical review process for accessing the data, you are having it immediately if you are running a company. And the boundaries of the ethical aspects of this are very blurry. There is an example now on the new regulation of the FDA, the Federal Drug Agency in the United States, where they have defined what is a medical device, a medical app, and non-medical app. And everything that is looking at lifestyles of the population is considered non-medical. That means that the restrictions on privacy in this data are really minimal. And that has been a change that has happened just several months ago. So well, we are having that, a complete, really paradoxical system where the academics that usually were providing the type of data that could be replicated, that means that we were using pseudonymized data because we needed to put it so other research labs could replicate what we were doing. It keeps on being like that while the world in the private companies is sort of Wild West, when you can do nearly whatever you want if you are tweaking the system enough.
By the way, if anybody in the audience wants to actually raise a comment, Katrina?
Sure, yeah, I'll jump. It's hard to jump in when you're up on the screen.
Sorry, Katrina, wait a second. We cannot hear you properly. Go.
Can you hear me now?
Can you speak up, please?
Yep, I'll speak, I'll yell. Can you hear me right now?
No, not quite.
All right, this is probably as loud as I can talk.
We don't want the neighbors coming to your house, so don't go. Let's try to be just quiet to see if we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'll yell as loud as I can. I guess I was just going to say. I mean, from a humanities point of view, the issues around privacy, are still important, but I guess quite different in some ways. That we're often thinking about things like we've got some indigenous research in the center, and so often it's around things like data sovereignty. So who does the data belong to? So we might do the research, but the ethics of the working with those communities means that we give the data back to them, and they own it. It's a sort of quite a different situation. So yeah, and then our industries too, at least for me, that I tend to work with the cultural industries, and so the issues around profit are sort of not there because we're both working from a sort of non-for-profit basis, I suppose. So yeah, anyway, interesting differences.
I mean, you raised a good point. Thank you, Katrina. It's probably going back to the difference I mentioned before. We tend to think about industry using our data, our private data, whatever we want to define it, as an evil, right? Because they're profiting from our own data. But I don't think that is the mentality that we should have. That's why perhaps the question was why research using your private data, it seems to be a bit more tolerated at industry to try to build a product, for example, right? And that's something that is still there, and still that stigma, it will be difficult to actually get rid of. So I would like to move from the privacy data. There is anybody else that want to talk before we move on?
Yeah, I have a question for Alfonso. What you say is true. Alfonso, what you say is really interesting. You are not looking to, you say that you're not interested in building IP in your company. That's actually, and we saw this morning what open source coding did to data mining, the blow up industry. It's a tricky question. Will you be open? It's an hypothesis. Will you be open to share your research and development if all the other companies in your sector do the same for everyone to use? Obviously, your sector is very sensitive because it depends. But this idea that as a private company, building IP is not your goal, it's actually really interesting.
Absolutely right, and we did it. We did it. That's the reason, because an Australian company, Navantia Australia, formerly belonged to an Spanish company. Why we are here? Because we bring with not just a legacy data, not just with a good engineering skill, people working here trying to educate it. Australia don't need it. Australia just needed during a certain time to cover a gap quicker than they can do it. Spain did the same at the 80s. We did the same that this country, the enterprise that this country is embedded inside of the Navantia building, is exactly the same that the Spain ran at the 80s. We want, at that time, we want to create an industry capability to create jobs, to create skills, to create richness in certain areas. And we know that we have a gap. We haven't the technologies, we haven't the skills for do that in a short time that we need to do. Not just because the government are changing every 4 years, that also. It's because you cannot really lose time when you are in a drama. And that really was the jobs. We need to create capabilities, we need to create industries in an areas that they are suffering the value there. And we decided that as we don't have the capabilities right now, we need to acquire. And we acquired from the US. And we learned during many years from the US to build vessels. And after that, we started with our own path. The export model is the karma every industry partner are looking for, because it's the return of investment, you know. And especially when you are 100% study-owned company. But the point is, we bring with this technology in Australia, for sure, under contract, but anyway, it's exactly the same what we did with the US and with the French. And we thought that even in the 16th century, when we are building and crossing the wall in Malaspina, Corbett, you know, many of that technology can bring from UK engineers. I'm talking about 16th century. Means this is not new. All the countries did. This country did as well. But at the time is why these IP rights that formally becoming to a capability in Australia cannot be applied for all the industry scenarios that you want to build with. The point is, IP right itself for us has no value. It's just a protective measurement when you want to really don't let others to enter in your field. But it's not because the IP, it's because you are not good enough and the others are better than you, and you want to protect them. If we are using the IP right for that purpose, we are slowing the growth of this world, you know? And then we need to really, that I said, a cool reset, you know? We need to really make a cool reset in all the board of directors of all the companies and try to say, okay, I achieved good milestone with the technology we did. This technology for me, the reward is not as any value, but we need different technology. Why this technology cannot be used for other countries? So starting their own path, you know. That's a way. I guess that the time that we are able to really underprotect our concerns could be the right way for starting to see an evolution.
Okay.
But in the industry panel, I guess that we could. With the first thing we did when we lose one of the billionaire contracts this country released, when we were tendering 2 years ago against the UK, they won the contract. The first thing Navantia did was to put it on service to the winner and said, competition ended. You won, not us. We are formally than you doing frigates here in this country. We know that the gaps are, we know that the skill capabilities created in the country are ready to go. We offer our lesson learned for you. They said, we don't need you. But anyway, no matter, we did it. If we never do, things never happen. We knock this window, next window will come soon. No matter, it's a matter of your own criteria and the board or director of your company's thoughts. And I guess things like the pandemic and so probably move the thoughts of many of the people that are only looking for business and really say that, okay, probably in the future could be more business for me. It will help this grow.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very good point. And IP rights and research industry is a very big rabbit hole that probably better not to get into at the moment. But that's a quite interesting point for Navantia. Actually, good to know, and quite good one to follow, to be honest. Okay, I would like to jump to the third point because that's probably going to link a bit with the final one. So we're in the interest of time, a bit short. So what I want to talk is how the actual whole big data science nowadays have produced opportunity for industry and research, and how much industry is actually building capacity and capability in-house instead to counting with the knowledge transfer or knowledge from universities. We're talking about that. So because it seems to me that every single industry now in the world got a big data scientist department, and basically they're actually working on that when we have data scientists actually doing research. And I wonder how that synergy is actually happening, or is actually something important to have that capability in-house. What the opinion from the researchers and from the industry?
Well, from a point of view of the industry, well, I could speak about industry in Spain. And as you may know, CDTI is the main funding agency in Spain to promote research projects or innovation activities in Spanish companies that could be done individually or in cooperation. And when done in cooperation, could be nationally or internationally. So in the last year, the ICT sector that includes big data received from CDTI 160 million to develop 368 projects. So that's what we've been doing in Spain. And a few of the projects were to develop different kind of platforms. For example, to develop virtual communications on the cloud, also for e-commerce, combining these technologies, big data with artificial intelligence, for example, to help to set prices on items on e-commerce. And also, I think in the tourism sector is also being applied also for managing in the tourism industry. And that's a bit an overview of this.
Okay, that's good to know. That's quite interesting. I guess that things are changing because the opportunities are arising. So I know what the area that is. I think that you're right. That's probably the one I would like to finish with is expert interpretation of the big data, right? Because what I've seen the big data as one open a door and it's a microscope, but it's not. Big data is quite subjective.
Thank you, Sergio. But just one comment related to the previous one. I think that a major difference between Australia and Spain, and where Spain has to learn a new way, is the cooperation between academia and industry. It's very difficult, and Navantia and formerly Astilleros Españoles was an example of that. I started my first research in Astilleros Españoles in Cadiz. That was a very rare opportunity because this is not happening there. And in this transfer of knowledge and practices between Australia and Spain, if we have something to really communicate to our colleagues and the companies in Spain, is how to cooperate with academia in a better way. Okay. That's an statement. And in relation to expert knowledge, I think this is absolutely critical. We are talking about big data. There is another field that is called complex numbers, where you have very few units of analysis. We are working with health systems. It could be that we are working with 6 cases, or like the states in Australia, or 17 autonomous communities in Spain. That's all. But every one of these cases has hundreds, millions of variables related to what we are studying in these cases. These complex numbers, as it happens with big data, requires expert knowledge. It's impossible to really understand the prior knowledge base if you don't have experts working there. It's critical for understanding the meaning of the data and the final interpretation of the data. But also, it's very important to work with these experts throughout the whole process of data analytics, the data mining process. And this is where we have been cooperating with the Technology University in Barcelona in an area called knowledge discovery from data, on how we can incorporate experts in the whole process of analysis. There are a major development in the area of big data. It's what it's called the DECO, the collaboration between the designers and the operational part, or BO it's called. And really just realizing to what extent, when you are designing new models or new apps, you need a cooperation with the operational part throughout the whole process. As this is happening, it's also important to work with the experts throughout the whole process. And this is where pattern recognition, very quick understanding of things that for the data analyst or for the coordinator of a project doesn't make sense. And you meet together with the experts and they say, this is the origin of that is this. Genaro was explaining an example that it's the thing we see every day. It's the case in problems with child problems and mortality in the first week of life, and how they saw that the problem was between mothers between 25 and 35 years. It made no sense, because logically it would be with people who will be older. Just talking about with experts, as Genaro told me before, they said, oh, this is because women that are above 35, they have a whole procedure very clear just to avoid problems. So this is not happening with the women that are 10 years younger, so they are having more problems. And that type of thing, the expert combined with big data, is the critical component that can really provide something that I think neither deep learning or machine learning would bring, because there is a need of this capacity of humans of pattern recognition.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So that is completely from academic or research perspective, and I would like to add a caveat to what you explained, and also like some sort of like follow-up confirming what you said. So I'm in academia, and I have a lot of like connections with industry and collaborations with industry. And one of the major problems that we have is that as a researcher or academician, I would like to go at the frontiers of research, frontiers of knowledge. I would like to change the borders in the knowledge. While, as per my experience, working with industrial people, they would like to have actionable stuff that will go to market quickly, and it will give us profit. So they are looking for MVPs, while minimum viable products, while I look to expand the boundaries of research in certain areas. And this is quite challenging in a sense, because I don't want to, as a researcher, do standard stuff, but at the same time, I would like to have my research translated, and connection with industry will facilitate that. So once I connect with industry, and if I generate something which is translatable, the industry will help me to fast forward that path and make the innovation converted to impact. But how we can facilitate that, and this is like confirming what you said, that Australian government has been quite good in a sense. Like there are lots of schemes that help us to do it. And in particular, for instance, linkage grants applications, the industry comes in, it gives minimum like amount of support. And that is all about research. I do a cutting edge research and government will pay for that, just to connect industry and research. These facilitators are needed. We cannot like just leave industry and research to get, you know, like with themselves to explore that connection. There should be a facilitator that provide the resources required for both of these entities to get the sort of benefits of what they have, because the objectives are basically different.
Yeah, I guess that you can consider that the expert knowledge should come from the university, research entities, institutions collaborating with industry, right? That would be the perfect synergy, I guess, based on what you were mentioning before about not wanting to produce IP, but wanting to have the team that works.
No, that's right. Coming back to the point, I guess that we are on the way for achieve this goal. The timeline is probably the question to answer. Believe me that we are experiencing friction, internal friction with those that we call digital twins, because there are part of the industry partners that believe that it is a know-how that you are putting over the table ready to go for whatever you want to use. And it is fully true. It is exactly true. It's exactly true. When the navies are asking for the designer during the acquisition program, okay guys, we run an acquisition program during 5, 4, 6 years, but we need to really sell this unit for the next 35. Who will maintain for me, not get the true life support, yet who will be accountable for the things well performing as intended? Me. And you are creating liabilities with the owners and the final user because, not just the IP rights, because you are not letting them to entry in the design aspect that they pay for before, because don't forget it, they pay for that. How to put this in a context, because we can deliver. Okay, this is the set of drawing, that's to you. You can manage whatever you want. But if that's in your coin, and that's not the way. I guess that the point is, okay, we need to provide that we not just only create naval units that the Navy needs, also that we give with this package the enough information to deal with during the next 35 years, no matter who deal with. The information is that. That's what we call ship therapy. What information, what data really is needed for the purpose? Probably the data in storage during the building process is not needed for you. It's just because the building process, blocks, and so on. But there are many relevant information that you never receive it because it's not included in the design package. Yeah, you will need. That's the digital twin. If the digital twin are just sending us at the same time that the units, the final user will have full accountability for manage this unit whatever they want. Many people say that for industry partners it is a loss of business. I get that no, exactly the opposite. Because if we really let them to do this, they will need more capabilities because they will know how performant the vessel are. And probably they want to really do things and they have not the right capability or they need for help or whatever. It needs business around. We need to change the model of the business in the industry, at least in the defense industry. And when we are really happy to do it, and also not just Navantia, all the industry partners in the world, we probably can start to really deliver that that the Navy needs.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm suffering, I'll say suffering on my own because I'm working with DSTG and Thales at the moment, and it's being a bit of a challenge. But I think that unfortunately we have no time for more. Have been fantastic, and I would like to thank the panelists again. Please join me in thanking you very much.